Hello and welcome to our special coverage of the BRICS Summit, which is underway in Russia's southwestern city of Kazan. I'm Zhongshi, live in Beijing.
I'm Wang Mengmang. Well, this is the final day of the summit. Yesterday, the BRICS members adopted the Kazan Declaration outlining key areas of cooperation and the bloc's unified stance on some global issues. And today, member states and their outreach partners are meeting to discuss the group's interaction with many other global majority countries.
CGTN will bring you exclusive coverage on the event. We will explore how the BRICS mechanism works and how it fairly represents the global south and contributes to global economic stability.
That's right. And actually, the 16th BRICS Summit is entering the final day in Kazan, Russia, where our colleagues Dai Kai and Ilyusha Milenkovic have been following the developments very closely for us. And now let's go live to them for the latest. Well, Kai, good to see you there. The BRICS Plus dialogue will begin soon. What are some of the details you can share with us?
That's right, Mom. I'm right now near the media center of the BRICS Summit. And as you just mentioned, the large and small scale meeting held yesterday. Leaders from across the world expressing their confidence in the BRICS development, as well as the role this framework plays for addressing global challenges. And they also expressed the belief that BRICS countries has become a model of multilateralism. So according to Russian media outlet, on the third day, which is the final day of the BRICS Summit, which is today local time, Russian President Vladimir Putin is scheduled to meet UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who's visiting Russia for the first time since 2022. And Putin and Guterres are expected to discuss the conflicts in the Middle East, as well as Ukraine, as well as the general activities concerning the United Nations. Meanwhile, the group is also expected to announce new members at the summit, as well as finalize the establishment of what they call a new partner state status. And there will also be the first and second session of BRICS Plus. It's a concept different from the large and small scale leaders meeting held yesterday. So what exactly is BRICS Plus, people might ask? Well, rather than expanding the core set of BRICS members, it's actually about seeking creating a new platform for boosting regional and bilateral cooperation across continents and aims at fostering the regional integration. And BRICS economies, of course, would play a key role in it. And after that, we can also expect a press conference from the Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Sure. All right, Kai, thanks for that update.
And our correspondent Ilyusha Milenkovic is also standing by for us this hour. Ilyusha, not only is the size of the grouping of BRICS getting bigger and greater, but if you look at the proceedings of the summit this time in Kazan, the dialogues are certainly inviting and encompassing more countries, which is very much in line with the spirit of inclusiveness of BRICS. What more can you tell us about today's event, the BRICS Plus dialogue?
Yes, that is correct. I'm currently in a press center where all the events are being closely monitored here in Kazan regarding this 16th BRICS Summit. From early in the morning hours, journalists are coming here literally in hundreds and very carefully monitoring every single word which was being said by the world leaders here. And what we know is that over 30 world leaders here are here currently in Kazan. And as you mentioned regarding today, it is going to be a final day of the BRICS Summit. And we will see a meeting between BRICS countries and countries which would like to have closer ties with BRICS. And those countries are not just those who would actually like to become BRICS members, a full-fledged BRICS members, but also countries which would like to explore their opportunities and to have closer ties, not just with the BRICS as an organization, but even bilateral ties with many of the BRICS member countries. And this is an excellent place to be for those. Just yesterday we had opportunity to speak with Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko. Let's not forget that Belarus is a country which is seeking for very close ties with BRICS, even BRICS membership. And he said that this place where he is gives him opportunity to speak with dozens of world leaders and to open so many ties for his country. And also what is interesting is that Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has also arrived here, and Turkey is a NATO member country. This is for the first time that we have seen a NATO member country being here, being present at the BRICS Summit. Right behind me we can see a number of footage of the arrival of world leaders here. So it will be a very busy day today here in Kazan, and of course it will be a lot of meetings between BRICS member countries and those countries which would like to have a BRICS membership.
Our Alyosha Milenkovic and Dai Kai monitoring the summit for us in Kazan this hour. Appreciate both of your reporting. Thank you so much.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has called on BRICS countries to work for the high-quality development of their cooperation. The appeal came in an address at the BRICS Summit, now underway in Kazan. During a narrow format meeting, President Xi welcomed new members to the BRICS family and invited many countries to become new partners. In an expanded format meeting, the Chinese president called for building a BRICS committed to peace and embracing the vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security. He says BRICS should stay committed to innovation as well as working to achieve green and sustainable development. President Xi encouraged building a bloc committed to justice as the international power dynamics undergo profound changes. He also listed facilitating people-to-people exchanges and advocating for harmonious coexistence among all civilizations. CGTN's Zhao Yunfei has the details from Kazan.
A new family photo with leaders representing the world's top emerging economies. In the first summit after BRICS welcomed 5 new members, President Xi Jinping called on all parties to make the right choices and promote world peace.
The more tumultuous our times become, the more we must stand firm at the forefront, exhibiting tenacity, demonstrating the audacity to pioneer and displaying the wisdom to adapt, so as to jointly open up a new chapter for the high-quality development of the greater BRICS cooperation.
President Xi stressed 5 key areas of development under the BRICS, including cooperation in security, innovation, sustainable development, global governance, and people-to-people exchanges.
Today we saw Xi Jinping. He's a great man. The Chinese leaders' participation is very important. China plays a very important role in BRICS.
China has been playing an active role in recruiting new members to BRICS. And now, with a greater BRICS, President Xi Jinping said China is committed to collaborating with other parties to kickstart a new era for the global south. The BRICS member countries now share 45% of the world's total population, and its GDP has increased to around 35%. President Xi said the increase is a landmark event in the evolution of the international situation. China calls on all parties to contribute to the high-quality development of BRICS cooperation and push forward for a community with a shared future for mankind. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Kazan.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has welcomed Iran's participation in the BRICS summit for the first time as an official member. In his meeting with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on the sidelines of the summit, President Xi said China is willing to strengthen cooperation with Iran within multilateral frameworks, such as BRICS, to further enhance the influence and voice of the global south and promote the development of a more just and equitable international order. Pezeshkian concurred, saying Iran looks forward to closely collaborating with China in various areas, including connectivity, infrastructure, and clean energy. He said Iran is willing to continue supporting China on issues concerning each other's core interests and jointly oppose hegemony and bullying. The two leaders exchanged views on the current situation in the Middle East. Xi Jinping said achieving a ceasefire in Gaza is the key to easing tensions in the region, and he called for joint international efforts to ensure the implementation of UN Security Council resolutions.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has welcomed Egypt's participation in the BRICS Summit for the first time as an official member. President Xi met with his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah el-Sisi on the sidelines of the summit. President Xi said China is willing to be a sincere friend that looks out for each other and a close partner for joint development with Egypt. He said China is willing to strengthen coordination with Egypt to further enhance the influence and voice of the global South and safeguard the common interests of developing countries. Sisi said Egypt is willing to further strengthen practical cooperation between the two countries. He said Egypt looks forward to closely collaborating with China on multilateral platforms such as BRICS to promote the development of a more just and equitable global governance system. The two leaders exchanged views on the current situation in the Middle East. President Xi said China appreciates Egypt's efforts in promoting a ceasefire and ending the violence. He said China is willing to strengthen coordination with Egypt to jointly push for an early resolution of the Israel-Palestine conflict and for easing tensions in the region.
Another important development on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping urging China and India to facilitate each other's pursuit of development aspirations. President Xi met with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit in the Russian city of Kazan. Xi said the two sides should strengthen communication and cooperation and properly manage differences and disagreements. He said China and India should shoulder international responsibilities and set an example for developing countries to seek strength through unity. He also called for the two countries to contribute to a multipolar world and the de-democratization of international relations. Modi said bilateral cooperation will benefit the recovery of the global economy and promote a multipolar world. He said India will fully support China's rotating presidency of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and strengthen communication and cooperation with China within multilateral frameworks such as BRICS. The two sides have also agreed to maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas and find a fair and reasonable settlement. And for more analysis, let's talk to our studio guest here, Mr. Qu Qiang, Fellow of Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China, and Professor Wang Xingsong of the School of Government at Beijing Normal University. Gentlemen, fantastic to have both of you on our program today. Mr. Xu, let me start with you. President Xi said the expansion of BRICS is a key milestone in its development, with members now doubled. Of course, we have yet to see how the 5 new members will be incorporated into the existing mechanism of BRICS. What are your thoughts on what this milestone means for BRICS?
Well, for example, I think this enlargement of the BRICS countries actually have a wider and enlarged representative of the whole global South countries. So right now we're looking at about more than 50% of the population from the global South countries now be representative. And also their GDP accounted together is about more than 30 trillion US dollars and accounted for more than 30% of the global GDP. And now I think this club has actually represented a major force, a rising and a very important force in the global economy and also political scenarios. And I think this is actually more effective in the global economic development as well as for the global political development, because previously we have the G20, but I think G20 will have a limited representative of the whole globe. Actually, I think the G7 within the G20 actually gazumped the whole club. And now we need a platform to represent the global South countries, to make a voice for them and help them to grow. And I think these 10 countries represented by 10 dots actually will build more of the interlinks intertwined with each other. Like you mentioned, well, 5 countries, if you say 1-to-1, 1-to-1, and then their link are actually very limited. But with more than 10 countries, and we have 10 countries right now, and we have more waiting on the list, and we can build more of the connecting dot, exponentially grows of the bilateral and multilateral connections, which will help them and enable them to represent more of the people, more of the opportunities, and also representing a better future for the global South country.
And Professor Wang, in yesterday's expanded format meeting, President Xi Jinping actually laid out his vision for the future development of BRICS. For example, he was calling countries to work together to build the organization into a primary channel for strengthening solidarity and cooperation among global South nations. What are your anticipation now with the expanded members, the inclusion of more members for the development of the BRICS?
Right, and actually I'd like to follow up with Professor Tu's point that the existing institutions are abundant. Nonetheless, many of the existing multilateral global governance institutions were built over a century ago after the Second World War, which means a lot of countries that exist today did not exist back then, which means that many of the institutions are not really representative anymore. At the same time, we have observed that many of the multilateral institutions are not functioning quite well. For example, the United Nations, which is the largest global governance organization, is having difficulty resolving many of the conflicts we're seeing, for example, in Gaza. At the same time, other organizations like G20 and so on and so forth are having problems of exclusivity or having problems of being based on ideology. In other words, we need new set of institutions that are more representative of the global South. At the same time, these organizations really truly can work for the interests of the global South countries. I think BRICS community was meant to contribute to global South development and is working toward that trajectory.
It will play a bigger role in global governance. Thank you for your analysis.
All right, gentlemen, we'll be back with you later on. The BRICS Plus dialogue will begin soon. We're, of course, monitoring that for you right here on CGTN. For now, let's check in with my colleague Tianwei, who is standing by in Kazan. Tianwei, we know you've been talking to some representatives attending the summit in Kazan. Share with us your observation of their priorities attending and covering the summit. What do they expect to hear from the leaders today?
Thank you, Zhongshi. Over the past few days here in Kazan for the 16th BRICS Summit, I've been talking to members of delegations that are BRICS members, but also those coming from what they call the BRICS Plus countries, as well as some of the media leaders, some of the most well-known media figures coming from these countries and beyond, on what interested them and why do they care so much about the role that China has been playing within the BRICS mechanism. There are several things really people have in mind, and they've been telling me once and again how important they are. As you know, the BRICS Summit, the 16th BRICS Summit, wrapped up on Wednesday already. At the end of the summit, the BRICS countries have put out a very long and very intensive, comprehensive declarations suggesting some of the important points of global governance, as well as cooperation and coordination among the BRICS countries. So among these points, many told me China's call for peace is extremely important. As you remember, Chinese President Xi Jinping, during his speech at the BRICS Summit, the first he talked about is BRICS for peace. And among the proposals China provided, one is about the Russian-Ukraine crisis, in which China and Brazil, two BRICS members, have proposed this peace friends proposal, meaning three important points: no expansion of battlefields, no escalation of tensions, and also no further fanning of the flames of the conflicts. And at the same time, the Gaza issue, together with the latest conflicts in Lebanon, has attracted so much attention among the BRICS countries and the BRICS Plus people coming from those countries. So meanwhile, China has already this week shipped 58 tons of medical aid to Lebanon as we speak. All of this demonstrates China's leadership and also responsibility role within the BRICS and beyond for peace. So they say the most important thing is to hear the voice of peace, make sure we have a plan for peace, make sure we can rally the crowd for peace at a time when the world is becoming so turbulent. The other thing, Zhongshi, people have been talking about is China's contribution to green development. Once again, that has been said by the Chinese president during his speech at the BRICS Summit. China has been committed to share some of the most important know-hows of AI, of green development, of green capacities, while the country is also embracing high-quality green capacity development itself, together with other BRICS countries. So they say they like the idea of capacity building from China with others in the BRICS countries, such as AI Center, such as Deep Sea Center, such as other areas of special economic zones. Another thing is about how to guard the global governance system that we have now, and also to improve it, especially including more fairer share coming from the global south. As we see in the final declaration of the BRICS Summit, one after another categories were about how to guard some of the commonly shared principles, the UN Charter, the WTO rules, and also the climate agreements that have already been reached among many in the world. They say these is important restatements of some of the important principles of the BRICS. So today, we are going to hear very soon leaders coming from BRICS countries and BRICS Plus countries, together with international and regional organizations coming together for the BRICS Plus meetings. There are 2 sessions in the very near future today. One can expect a lot of those opinions will be shared, both coming from China and those coming from BRICS Plus countries as well. Back to you, Zhongshi.
Pulling the collective wisdom and strengths of BRICS countries, old and new. Tia, we appreciate your reporting for us this hour. Thank you so much. And let's return to our conversations with our guests here in the studio. Professor Wang, Mama mentioned just now the vision laid out by the Chinese president at the extended format meeting yesterday, and he put forward a number of pillars that would guide BRICS forward, which is really important at this critical moment, because as it expands, people are wondering, where are you taking BRICS next? And the message from the Chinese president, first and foremost, is building a peaceful world through BRICS. How can BRICS countries come together as a positive force to encourage that world peace?
Right. I think, like I said earlier, the emergence of BRICS as a community is a response to the failure of the existing global governance institutions, particularly in the issue areas of security. And we are seeing security issues emerging in many parts of the world, and they're enlarging. And so BRICS has this mission of helping the world develop a new idea of how to resolve conflicts. And the Chinese government rolled out the Global Security Initiative a year or 2 ago, and the key message from that initiative is that we need to resolve conflicts by having dialogues rather than using power and force and bullying, because only by having dialogues can we have more sustainable solutions. I mean, if you look at the conflicts or the disagreements between China and India, the very fact that the 2 countries can settle the dispute, put aside the dispute and disagreement, and sit together and have more conversations about common prosperity and common development is exactly a good illustration of how conflicts can possibly be resolved. So in that regard, I think BRICS is setting a very good example for the rest of the world that we actually have alternative solutions, alternative means of accomplishing world peace.
And first, the top priority is, of course, building the BRICS into a peaceful community. And next in line is innovation. He talked a lot about innovation. There's going to be, some new forces fostering new quality development, new quality productive forces also. And he mentioned the construction of an AI cooperation center. Why the emphasis on innovation?
Well, I think innovation is the most important thing behind the technology. And technology is the fundamental force driving forward the growth. That's what the global south country actually need, or the human community all over the globe need. I agree with Professor Wang's mentioning about how we can solve the peace issues, because right now, trying to be peaceful has become a privilege, become a courage. You really need to stand out, to speak for yourself, then you can be peace. Otherwise, you have to choose side, and you can not just protect your own people, you cannot fight for your own growth, but you need to pay your cost and join either one side. So BRICS country actually give people that kind of platform. Okay, we just want the well-being of our own people. We want to do innovation. We don't want to join any side. We don't want to join the chaos. And now we talk about innovation. And innovation, when we're talking about innovation, talk about AI. what does that even mean? Well, a lot of people, when they think about innovation, is always about the developed nations, about tech giants, about the monopoly. But how about developing nations? And what about the emerging markets? They need a voice in the innovation, and you cannot take it away by blocking them, sanction them, or just take away the capital from those markets. And I think the BRICS countries actually, by pulling the wisdom, pulling the capitals, and pulling the brain powers, actually are trying to make an enabling and empowerment platform to make sure that innovation can happen. And it also comes to our next factors about new quality productive force and go green. President Xi Jinping mentioned this platform needs to be green because it's a commitment. And some people are saying, okay, we have a major oversupply of green product. I say that was a lie. Why? Because many of these BRICS countries, many of the global south countries actually do not have oil. They do not have the privilege to use this expensive energies, and they need a modernization. They need to be digitalized, and they need to develop their own technology. And what's the answer? The answer is the solar power, the wind power, which is free, and they need the equipment and technology to empower themselves to build the ground blocks for their industrialization. And I think BRICS countries actually promised this peaceful environment, this innovation support, and also hence leading to their own modernization and green development by the new quality development forces that we can share together. So I think that's the most important significance, that we need this platform in the first place and make it bigger.
And before we go further to break down President Xi Jinping's remark from yesterday's meeting, let's check in the latest with our reporter Huang Fei. She's been following the development very closely from Kazan. Well, Huang Fei, we understand this BRICS Plus dialogue is going to take place soon. Delegates are arriving there. Tell us the latest.
Well, that's right. Today is very much all about BRICS Plus. We first of all got a new photo opportunity of the new family. This moment will go down in history as the first time heads of delegations from more than 30 countries that are in the queue to join BRICS stand side by side to usher in a new era of BRICS cooperation. They will then have 2 plenary sessions to discuss in detail how to further cooperate under this expanded format. BRICS Plus, this is something that President Xi initiated. And so this is something that we're watching today. And another watch point will be a meeting between President Putin and the UN chief. The two are meeting for the first time in 2 years. And the UN has said that it remains on standby to offer mediation efforts. And according to the 43-page final declaration that was adopted overnight, BRICS nations, including Russia, welcomes all proposals to resolve the crisis in Ukraine in a diplomatic and peaceful manner. And so this is another major thing that we are watching. And at the end of the day, actually at 2 p.m. today, we're going to hear from Putin himself as he gives a press conference. And no doubt he will sum up the Kazan declaration and give more details on the things that we just talked about.
All right, CGTN reporter Huang Fei there for us with more details on the BRICS Plus dialogue. Thank you so much. Professor Wang, let me ask you a question about global governance. The reason why AI came up is also because there needs to be collective governance. And in terms of global governance, global South countries are traditionally at a disadvantaged place. When we talk about BRICS elevating developing countries, global South members, so that they can have a better say in global governance, what exactly does that mean? And what has BRICS done in elevating their positions and getting voices of the global South across?
Right, and I think earlier I mentioned the history of global governance at the end of the Second World War, when a lot of countries that are existing today did not even exist back then, because decolonization took decades to materialize. A lot of new countries emerged in the following decades, which means that the institutions were serving the interests of many of the nations that were there or were powers back then. So today we need a better representation of the interests of the global South countries, because if you look at the economic figures, they're accounting for over 70% of the global population, over 60% of the global GDP. So really the gravity of the world's population and economic growth is really in the global south. However, the existing institutions are not serving their interests in the best way. So we need new institutions not to displace the old ones, but rather to serve as a complementary function for the existing institutions, and that's what BRICS is there for. You also bring up the fairness issue because Global South is not only not well represented, but also because it is not well represented, it's having trouble of having its interests protected. Talk about AI development, for example. AI development needs a lot of data, and data needs to be tagged. And so a lot of tagging work is happening in the Global South. Why? Because it's cheaper over there. But who gets the most profits? Well, the tech giants like Professor Tu just mentioned. So you see unfairness, injustice happening everywhere in our daily life, in all sectors. So at the end of the day, I think the Global South needs a bigger voice in order to have their interests better protected.
Are countries, especially the member countries, both old and new, on the same page on all the issues that's being proposed and put forward by the organization? Or are there different, various development needs to be taken care of, interests to be accommodated? Professor Chu.
Well, Mamang, I think, of course, they're not always on the same page on many fronts. Well, I think for the mainframe, I think they all agree. Representing the Global South, helping the emerging market to develop and make sure that peaceful environment can happen global-wise. I think that's a reason why the BRICS countries are forming, but they do not agree with everyone on every issue, that's for sure. And I think that is the beauty of the BRICS platform. That's the reason why we need a rule-based and the negotiation, discussion-based platform for every Global South country to address their own concern. For example, in the global payment systems, while India is not quite sold, they want their own share and their own representations during this whole systems. And on the other issues, probably Brazil will have a different thinking, and also in the raw material and the new development, probably Saudi Arabia or UAE will probably have their own thoughts. This is very, very natural. Come on, let's say just within just one family, your pop and your mom even think differently on how we should eat for the dinner, right? So that is very, very normal. But the thing is, how can we solve this? Just like Professor Wang has mentioned, we have already solved the toughest issue. For example, the national security border issues through very peaceful talk in a very controlled attitude. That set a great examples for some other bigger countries when they can solve the problem by only the brutal forces. And now I think with this kind of mechanism extending into the future, we will surely solve a lot of other less significant issues and meet each other finally on the same page. And also like on the AI issues and on the green development issues, those issues actually be frequently argued during the past few years and between the different nations. But actually for this kind of issue, Global South nations such as the BRICS countries, they actually have a great consensus. Even though India have a different opinion, even the Russian are very different, even China, Brazil have a very different economic structure, but they all agree with each other because finally they realized as Global South, as emerging market, they have more shared interest than the differences.
While we're on the topic of differences and disagreements, we're of course watching out for the BRICS Plus dialogue today, where existing members sit down with aspiring countries. Professor Wang, what makes BRICS at this stage appealing to all of these other countries that are queuing up to join? We're talking about some 30 plus countries that have expressed an interest to joining the BRICS. What are you seeing in this organization as of this moment?
Right. I think overall, if you look at the global order and these changes in the past decade, you've seen that the existing institutions like WTO are kind of being paralyzed, and they're not fully functioning to serve the interests of many of the countries, including those in the Global South. At the same time, the BRICS community, after it was funded over a decade ago, has been working pretty well. If you look at the overall GDP, like Professor Qu mentioned, now 35% of the GDP, of the world's GDP comes from the BRICS countries, accounted by the purchasing power. And within the BRICS community, bilateral trade is going really, really strong. China's bilateral trade with India was something nearly 50 billion, but China with South Africa, over 100 billion. China with Brazil, 165 billion. So we're talking about a lot of trade going on, and also investments. Both India and China are very strong investors in Africa, and China is investing very heavily both in Russia and Brazil, and also India. So that really, it's showcasing to the rest of the world that BRICS can be a functioning global governance institution. It is also a very huge economic and trade magnet that's attracting people who are interested in prosperity. That's why 34 countries are now waiting in the pipeline to be applying for membership.
So over the past decade or so, we've seen the solid foundation and growing interest from countries to joining this bloc. And President Xi laid out this vision, Professor Wang. What kind of specific forms would these cooperation centers take, and what are some of the expected outcomes?
Well, I think that this summit is showcasing to the world that there is a strong message here that BRICS can do. BRICS can bring together trade volumes, investments, and security opportunities. At the same time, BRICS is enlarging, it's being very, very attractive. And I think at the next stage, I think the foreign ministers and the development ministers of all the BRICS members are going together in the next month or the next year to discuss the details. So far, I think there are a few directions that have been pointed out from the communique. One is that an international payment system is being worked out, although the details need a lot of deliberation. And also de-dollarization is a long-term trend because almost every country in the world other than the US is not extremely happy with having to be reliant on dollar for everything, right? And also, I think President Xi also pointed out that BRICS countries can work more on sustainable development. This is a very important issue area. Why? Because if you look at the impacts of natural disasters as a result of the climate change in the recent years, the highest impacts go to the global south, whereas the highest pollution does not happen over there. So global south countries have a very high interest in resolving the issue of sustainability. That's why I think President Xi brought up this issue of green development and sustainable development and using high technologies to transition our economies. This is going to be really hard, but I think the BRICS countries are working on it.
Mr. Xu, let me follow up on that, on the topic of sustainable development projects. You're dealing with a group of emerging economies and developing countries that might lack funding, technology, and the know-how to go green and to ensure those sustainability projects. What can they do? Of course, we encourage the transfer of technology among members within this bloc, but they need extra help. Where does that extra help come in terms of monetary assistance, technological support?
Well, Zhongshi, actually, personally, I was in many of this kind of a project. For example, the AIIB as well as for the New Development Bank. Well, do you know that if you want development, everybody knows you need money in the first place, right? But money always becomes very, very expensive. Just like Professor Wang has mentioned, many of the multilateral financial institutions have actually been paralyzed. For example, if you want to borrow money from the advanced nation, I'm going to tell you, there's going to be lots of strings get attached. So you need to choose sides. This has become a luxury to stand in between, right? And also, if you want to resort to traditional multilateral institutions, and then you will see a lot of stringent conditions require your fiscal condition, requires on your payment conditions, and that can be too much for the developing nations. But New Development Bank and AIIB, such kind of arrangement actually help to solve that kind of problem. My friends actually in a developing nation, they want to build a local elementary school. Actually, they try to form up the application, format, and then to ask for the money for the new development bank. And actually, they get it. For over 20 years, the interest rate is around 3%. And I'm part of it. This is actually a long-waited money to support local villages, to help more than 1,000 children with education. 20 years. 3% of interest rate, this is very, very low. So if anyone can lend you this money for so long, so cheap, you will call them your true friends. And AIIB and the New Development Bank and all the other arrangements are helping with many of this kind of project to support them with the real deal money. And secondly, I think the BRIC countries believes in giving the fish is not good enough. Rather, we should help them teach them how to fish, right? So that's the reason I think President Xi Jinping mentioned about the commitment about people-to-people exchange, about building the learning center, right? And if you go to Ethiopia, if you go to many countries in Africa, Sub-Sahara, South Africa, south part of the Africa, you will see what we have the agriculture teaching centers in there, teaching local people how to, grow the high-yielding rice or the wheat. Actually, they're feeding people for real, for good. A lot of villages are getting out of the desperate, grinding hunger. Children are stopped dying. This is a real deal. This is not talk shop. I've been walked into many exemplary projects like this in Myanmar, which the war is still going on, in Ethiopia, which the local farmers earns only like $15 a month. So this has been helping them. And other than that, I think it's technology, like Professor Wang just mentioned. I just add one keyword into that. Not only supporting them with technology, but with affordable technology. When I go to Ethiopia, they do not have enough of the oil. And they want energy to power up their factories and workshops. How should they do this? Okay, solar and wind. And solar panels, if you buy them from the European Union, it's going to be very, very expensive for every kilowatt per hour. And if you buy from China or some other partners in ASEAN nations, it's only about 1/10 or even 1/20 of the cost. So which allows those countries actually can build their own modernization and industrialization. Now they can use the machine to build furniture. They can build all kinds of the modernized manufacturing product to sell them into international market in exchange for dollars, for euros, for yuan, for yen, and then they get rich. Go to Nigeria, you can see many of these vivid stories and examples. So I think from the technology, from the teaching, from the powers, and from the financial support, every aspect, we're actually doing the real thing to support the South-South development rather than just put some slogan and have an empty talk shop about it.
This is such critical information, Mama, because all people see are these summits that are attended by those leaders. But what happens in between summits is the stories told by Mr. Chu just now, real stories on the ground, changing lives and livelihoods, having a real impact on people there.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that the new development bank was established to address the infrastructure investment shortfalls. But now it's expanded to include education and so many other areas. And in terms of the receivers, it's providing loans and other investments not only for member states but also for the emerging markets and developing economies.
That's right. Yeah, I think the new development bank is exactly for filling the gap which is, by the way, very huge in today's developing world. Despite decades of the World Bank and IMF work in developing countries to achieve more justice and more development. China's Belt and Road Initiative was meant to fill that gap starting from 2013. However, more is needed. I think New Development Bank has rolled out 105 projects in the past decade, and for example, India has been the largest receiver of loans from the New Development Bank. Many of the projects go to the infrastructure, sanitation, water, sanity, and so on and so forth. So, like Professor Chu mentioned, the daily life quality conditions are really being improved as a result of the loans and funds from the New Development. But there's got to be more to be done, though. New Development Bank needs to have more funds coming in, and also it needs to cover more projects to go beyond the existing infrastructure, but also to include include the sustainable development and green technologies.
I think Professor Wang mentioned just now the grievances expressed by developing countries towards the existing international system, including the international financial system. So this is a question very much in Mr. Chu's department. Now more and more countries are looking to trade in their local currencies because one of the main mandates of BRICS is to facilitate trade. And how do we make trade easier? A lot of the times it requires trading in local currency, circumventing the dollar, and mitigating the risk associated with dollar exchange rates. Where are we on this topic? Because this is not going to happen overnight. It's a long way to go. Are there enough incentives for member countries within BRICS to do this? Where are we exactly now?
Well, I think we are about to make a major breakthrough. I think India is the last stop we need to convince. But I think even Indians, they have a strong impetus. They have a strong drive to do that, but only on what kind of condition in their favor. I think the Global South more and more understand one thing. Well, this is actually my doctoral dissertation.
Wonderful.
Yes. So using US dollar is, well, we should say, provided some merits for the international trade stability and the framework by ruling. These are good, but the cost is very expensive, actually, for the Global South countries, right? You need to, for example, when I trade with Mang, when we are two different nations, and then we need to use Zhongshi's currency, and then I need to exchange my currency into yours, and then exchange into Mang's. So you are always, the middleman. You always grease your palm, and then our costs become your profit. And this is not only one trade, because when we are together representing more than 35% of the world GDP and almost 50% of the world trade, you're not greasing your palm, you're actually taking this absolute chunk out of the international trade. So this becomes the cost of all of us, and we are not very, very developed and rich in the first place. So I think this is not fair. Like, all the leaders, as I mentioned, we need a just world order, not only politically, but also in the trade. And secondly, I think the side effect can be really huge. When we always trade through the US dollars, this direct cost is just one thing. Another thing is that what we call the tide of the US dollar. So when our economy are growing, trade are prospering, and then US dollar always flow in the emerging market and drive up the assets price, like the house, like the stock market, the national T-bond, and etc. But because in economy we have the cycles, and when the economy cycles go downward, and then US dollar will flow back with exponential substantial speed, and that will always put a huge pressure, crushing and collapsing the emerging market's assets price. The housing market and the stock market, you see, during the COVID, many emerging markets, their financial market just crashed, and they need to resort to the IMF. They need to resort to multinational financial institutions, and they get burdened on it. So we need to solve this problem not by once, but for good. And also, I think, in more than that, U.S. and other Western countries are using U.S. dollar as a weapon, weaponizing their currencies to punish the people not by doing bad, but by not choosing their side. The sanctions, blockings, and everything are impeding those emerging markets to have a better living standard. So in order to solve that, I think this new system is a must. But I want to reiterate, this is not to challenge the dominance by US dollar. Like Zhongshu has mentioned, this is not going to happen just during the night. But it's just to edge up a little bit so that we will have a larger space to trade between ourselves, make our life easier. And also, plus, technically, the previous SWIFT system and the CHIPS system are really very, very old. This is something that get burst like 50 years ago. Like SWIFT system is just only a messaging system, and CHIPS system, a settlement system. Just take a look at Chinese CIPS system. Our CIPS system, CIP, is both a messaging system and a settlement system. It's much, much more advanced than the current situation. So I think even by technological consideration, we need something new to make our trade more efficient. I think based on that consideration, we really need something to happen.
Well, having said that, though, China has always been instrumental in trying to advocate for financial reform in the existing financial institutions like the IMF, addressing the infrastructure, the investment quotas, as well as voting rights. What more leverage would an expanded BRICS have, Professor Wang, on trying to push for a fairer or a more just international financial system?
You know what? That's actually exactly the sore point for the global South, and with the IMF, the IMF has a weighted voting power structure, and that gives Americans 16.5% of the voting right. But for any major change in terms of voting weight or other major substantial issues at IMF, you got to have 85% of the agreement, which means that you can never reach 83.5% if the U.S. holds 16.5% of the voting share. So that means the U.S. has always had the veto power in the IMF, which really frustrates many emerging powers like China, India, and others. That's one of the reasons why other institutions are being built, including AIIB, including the New Development Bank, which I think I agree with Professor Tu that is not to replace the existing institutions like the IMF. However, it does showcase to the world that we can do this thing differently. For example, at New DB, the voting share is equally shared by the 5 founding members. Each has 20% of voting share. So that means nobody has veto power, because by design, veto power cannot happen, right? So that really means to the rest of the world, and especially to the global South, that a financial institution can be equal and just and can better serve the interests of global South rather than just to serve a few developed nations.
Mr. Chu, based on what you just said, it does seem that the benefits of trading in each other's currencies far outweigh the shortcomings. Now, what stands in the way of all of us doing that? What are the challenges and obstacles there, and why were certain countries more hesitant in implementing this?
Well, I think most majority of the nations actually already agree with it, on the same page. I think India have a different opinion, because currently I think Modi government have a very ambitious plan of internationalization of the Indian rubles. But India, well, as an economy, is growing very fast for sure, but their weight in international trade and technology still cannot represent too much to match their goals in the internationalization of their own currency. So that's the reason why ruble has not yet become what they want it to be. And also, secondly, because India's currency management policy, especially for the internationalized currency, has rather yet to be mature. They have a terrible, They have a terrible committee managing the internationalization of their currencies. But this committee actually put lots of the control over the internationalization of Indian rubles. So the rupees actually cannot be so easily sell and buy across the border. And that can be another problem, that people feel hesitated to use rupee for international trade. So they actually create lots of obstacles for themselves. And I think, yes, you mentioned, I think the common problem we have to building this common trading system is that what kind of a value anchor should we use? Should we use Chinese yuan as the value anchor? Should we use Russian rubles? Should we use a Brazilian real? Or any other currencies? Or we learn from the IMF to form a SDR, a basket, right? A special drawing rights. But SDR is only to be used to solve the intergovernmental debt. So it's not for the global daily trade. It's like a small vendor selling products into another nation by another private small vendor. It's not like that. So I think right now what we have actually in favor of building this system is what we call the dot-to-dot linkage. For example, China and Russia bilateral trade settlement system, or Brazil to India or Russia to India trade system. And this currency swap / settlement system is already been very, very mature. We have no problem. China has been doing very, very fluently with the partners by a dot-to-dot settlement system. But how can we make them into a multi-dots interlinked, intertwined system, have a very stable value anchored currency or a token representative by the currencies? And I think that can be a challenge. Some people are proposing that we should have a digital currency with different weight of different countries' economy. For example, 40% of yuan, 20% of Russian rubles, something like that. But how can we make sure this proportion of the values can be decided and everybody can agree on the same page, and how we can solve the dispute if some other country, for example, have a sudden depreciation on their currency or cannot have enough collaterals to support their values of the currencies or national trade, or violated or defaulted on their national debt. So how can we have this safety net or problem-solving mechanism? And I think this is probably the most important thing waited to be discussed in details in the future.
This is getting very technical, but this is such useful information that helps to put things into perspectives here. Professor Wang, can I invite you into this also and just talk about the obstacles and challenges faced by BRICS members when it comes to trading in a common currency or trading with local currencies?
Right. I think with all what we have said about the prospect of the BRICS community, which is enlarging, there are disagreements within the BRICS countries over a number of issues. Bilaterally, China, India obviously have the territorial dispute. However, it's being resolved step by step. But between Egypt and Ethiopia, they're having some issues over the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, where Ethiopian government needs the power coming from the water, but Egypt needs the water for farming and other usage, right? And the UAE and Ethiopia are also having some problems in Sudan. So with all that said, their disagreements are just natural. What's more important is that all the countries can put aside their disputes and sit down and achieve a common goal.
All right, Professor, thank you so much. And the BRICS group has gained significant attention in recent years due to its growing influence in global economies and politics. The expansion of the group represents a pivotal moment in international relations, reflecting the shifting dynamics of power towards emerging economies.
To become full members of BRICS.
On January 1st, 2024, the BRICS group welcomed 5 new members: Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. With the admission of these countries, the BRICS Plus now represents almost half of the world's population, a third of global GDP, a quarter of global trade, and 40% of global oil production. Each of the new members has a unique role to play in the bloc. Egypt and Ethiopia will bring more voices from Africa. They will lead more discussions on the region's stability, trade, and investment. Iran offers significant energy resources, especially in oil and gas. It also provides a perspective on Middle Eastern geopolitics, enhancing regional dialogues within the group. As one of the world's largest oil producers, Saudi Arabia will play a key role in global energy security discussions and foster economic diversification strategies. Its geopolitical influence in the Middle East allows it to provide insights into regional dynamics. The UAE is a major global financial and trade hub, particularly through cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Its strategic location enhances connectivity between BRICS nations and global markets. The concept of BRICS originated in 2001 when economist Jim O'Neill coined the term BRIC to describe Brazil, Russia, India, and China as emerging markets with significant growth potential. The group's first official meeting took place in 2009, with South Africa becoming a member a year later, solidifying the BRICS framework. Over the years, BRICS has focused on economic cooperation, political collaboration, and cultural exchange, hosting annual summits to address global issues and foster dialogue.
And now let's get some more analysis from our guests here in the studio. Let's talk about multilateralism, because one of the main focuses on the BRICS community is to promote and uphold the spirit of multilateralism. We've seen some very important one-on-one bilateral talks. Tell us your thoughts, Professor Wang, on the weight and the gravity of multilateralism for the global south, and going forward now, how would they strengthen even further to gain more leverage and strength?
Right. I think in today's world, we are seeing emerging global issues and traditional global issues, including climate change, natural disasters, and the emerging new technologies, which can be disruptive, like the artificial intelligence. So that means we need global institutions to address those global issues. But at the same time, we have observed that many of the institutions are now being paralyzed, and so how to make new institutions function really is a difficult issue. So with the enlargement of BRICS, the top issue or top challenge is obviously that when you have a bigger organization, you may have a coordination problem, right? And you may have an identity problem, because BRICS is not based on ideology, it's not based on geography, but rather is based on a very close bonding on economic development and trade. It is also bounded by this common identity that we're not extremely happy with the Western-dominated global order, or so-called rules-more order that only serve the interests of the global North. So identity, how to build an identity within organization is a challenge. That's why I think President Xi proposed that we can take steps to enlarge the organization, right? And so this year we have 5 new members. What are we going to do with the next level of enlargement? I think BRICS Plus is a very smart idea of gradually expanding the organization so that we can build our institutions, and I'm talking about procedures, institutions that run this organization or run this community, at the same time considering new members coming in.
When we talk about gradual expansion, because people see that at the last summit you admitted 5 new members, it's going to be the same thing again with every summit. You're going to admit new members. We don't really know if that's the case. But talking about criteria, Mr. Chu, what do you think will continue to be the criteria in selecting countries to join BRICS?
Well, I think BRICS countries and this platform really take it very seriously. That's the reason why I think President Xi Jinping mentioned about the BRICS Plus concept back in 2017. That's quite a long time ago. But even today, we have another 10 members, another 5 members joined in. So we have 10 members together, and some more than 34 are waiting in the pipeline. So the reason why we're so cautious and slow is because we try to make sure that the true multilateralism and the true progress can be made. Well, talking about multilateralism, I think BRICS platform actually showed an example, because you see, well, China and India are competing economic-wise, right? Russian probably are facing a different stance with India politically, internationally. And also Saudi Arabia probably have a different, it's the largest Sunni country, and also Iran is the largest Shia country. They compete with each other regionally. But somehow this platform magically put everybody together on the same platform. I think the reason why is the answer that you want to listen to, you want to hear, that is what we can agree on together. And I think the recipe has already been mentioned by President Xi Jinping. Number 1 is peace, because ultimately every country regardless of their religious belief, regardless of economic structure or political decisions, they want the peace for development, for the well-being of their own nation, for their own people. And based on that, they are willing to sit down and listen to each other's saying, and even it's their own competitors. And also about innovation and technology, because they realized without technology, without the modernization, they're going nowhere. And also about the green development, and also about more the people-to-people exchange, and to have a just, more just, world order. I think they're all after that. So by agreeing on this page, and that's the reason why I think they want to put aside all the differences and sit on the table to talk to each other. So if you want to know what is the true representation of multilateralism and internationalism, and this is the case.
You mentioned people-to-people exchanges, and Professor Wang mentioned this identity within the BRICS bloc. I want to, delve further into that. How we know that identity is always something fluid. Countries are different in terms of history, their economic situation, their political system, and their religious beliefs. But as time goes on, as they reach different levels of development, would that identity shift? Or will the member countries form a new sort of identity?
It's very likely, but it takes many steps. I think at this moment, the most crucial bonding source for the BRICS countries is still the economy. And this is very much because all the BRICS members are at a similar development stage. Of course, you have differences, but overall, we are all developing countries. We face a common problem, which is modernization. How to make a better living, how to make a better economic situation for all is the common concern for all these BRICS countries. So that means talking about the bilateral trade or multilateral trade and investment opportunities and a common currency or a payment system. All these issues matter to everybody, because at the end of the day, we're concerned how we can make our economy better through this community. I think the Chinese authorities trying to show its leadership in that actually we can work together toward that goal. And President Xi Jinping pointed out that sustainable development and green transition can be the way for going further. This is because even for developing countries that are facing the life and death problems, transitioning to the green technology is the way to go for everyone. So economy and trade and investments are still the major bonding source.
Something else that just occurred to me is that geopolitical issues got their fair share of tension at the summit this time. For example, in those remarks by President Xi yesterday, he specifically mentioned the ongoing Ukraine crisis, the tensions in the Middle East, and that you have these major players from these issues, from these crises, participating in the BRICS Summit. Of course, these issues get discussed and talked about between leaders. Do you think that might have any bearing on the crisis itself, just using the goodwill, the positive energy, the positive force by the BRICS grouping in not solving the crisis altogether, but pushing them in the right direction, Mr. Xi?
Well, I think, Zhongshi, I think from the communique, we have already heard that we are forming a Friends for Peace group, try to talk about this issue and also try to do something also about this issue as well. I think this is very tricky, tactics if you want to separate the two parties who is engaged in war. Well, if you are pushing too hard and too strong, you're probably going to filling up one side or both sides to make the things worse. But if you are standing back too far, probably you're just talking and just sending a goodwill. You're doing nothing and going nowhere. So I think the BRICS group are actually trying to do it very, very carefully with a strong caution in here and try to calm down both sides. I think this is a very unique stance by BRICS country, not by the other Western countries. Try to just fill up the thing, make things worse. I think what we are trying to do is, like President Xi Jinping has mentioned, just calm everybody down. Look, there is always a place to talk to each other before the things get even worse and lasting longer. So I think like what we can form and why we can form the BRICS country platform in the first place. And we can always find an angle to have you two sides to sit down and to do things about it, and meanwhile providing humanitarian support to people who are suffering from those engagement, suffering from this conflict. And I think we have already mentioned about the Ukraine crisis, and I think furthermore moves can be made for the Gaza crisis. And so I think by calm down every side down, we can actually achieve some goals. For example, a pause. If we can achieve a pause, and then probably we can stop the war for some period of time, and then stop it for good. And then we will return to a peaceful environment. And this is already been doing it, because we have already heard the news and see the sign that both sides are showing the willingness to stand back a little bit. And we have previous successful examples. For example, right now, Saudi Arabia and Iran agreed to shake hands with each other on many institutions. They are now, well, we should not say they're close friends, but actually right now they are good to face each other and shake hands with each other with a goodwill. Yeah. And these progress has never been made before.
Mr. Xu, hold that thought. We just got word that Chinese President Xi Jinping has arrived at the venue of the BRICS Plus dialogue, also known as the BRICS Outreach Format meeting. We're monitoring that meeting for you right here on CGTN. Make sure you stay with us.
And of course, earlier this year, 5 new members joined the BRICS mechanism. They are Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, and the UAE. Many more developing nations want to join, including Nigeria. And Deji Bedmosi reports from Lagos.
The rapid expansion of the BRICS bloc as a powerful global geopolitical organization has been remarkable. In January this year, 5 countries, namely Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates joined the organization, which originally was made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now tens of other countries, including Turkey, Thailand, Malaysia, and Nigeria, have expressed interest in joining the bloc, which is holding this year's summit in Russia.
These countries believe that they have common interests, they have common objectives, they have common developmental aspirations, and they feel that working together will be mutually beneficial. So I think that is the major motivation for the formation of this BRICS.
Enthusiasm for the alliance is growing as countries, especially in the global south, continue to seek better alternatives to solve their economic and development challenges.
The essence of BRICS and benefit to the state parties is to leverage on unity, the power of unity, to grow. You can't see yourself down and remain on the floor forever. They have the right to aggregate, to grow, and change their future.
With its expansion, there are suggestions the group may adopt a new name to reflect its new composition. BRICS Plus has been mentioned, but there's no official confirmation yet. Data from the World Bank estimates BRICS members account for about 45% of the world's population, and their economies are worth around $30 trillion, which is about 28% of the global economy. Analysts say the benefits for member countries could be enormous.
So a lot of benefits are there, and there is also a better understanding of the needs of some of these developing countries within themselves. Those of them that are members of BRICS that are stronger have a better disposition to support the weaker one, rather than everybody looking up to countries in the West.
Now, BRICS championing for developing countries' interests has sparked the interest of the global south countries in joining the group. The bloc's expansion is expected to create new prospects for emerging markets and developing countries. Deji Bademasi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And Malaysia is bidding to become the latest member of the BRICS group founded by Brazil, Russia, India, China, plus South Africa. This year's host, Russia, has invited Malaysia to attend October's BRICS Summit, something Malaysia hopes will be a stepping stone to full membership. CGTN's Ryan Meltzer reports from Kuala Lumpur.
Malaysia is already a member of key groupings such as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and the Non-Aligned Movement, as well as major trade pacts, including the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership and the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership.
And regardless of who has led Malaysia, the country has long pursued a balanced foreign policy, enjoying close economic and strategic ties with both the US and China.
The government and analysts believe BRICS is a good fit for Malaysia and vice versa.
We have done the cost-benefit calculation in terms of grand strategic returns to the country, and where we see BRICS is a natural platform for us to not only elevate our voice, our influence at the global level in terms of consolidating our position now as a middle power and as a stabilizing power in the region.
I think BRICS plays a very important role in connecting Malaysia with the global south. And Malaysia has long been championing the global south with our focus on the non-aligned movement.
Malaysia has plenty to gain and to offer BRICS economically too. It's a major trading country, an exporter of commodities. It also plays a critical role in the global electronics supply chain.
I think we would be able to benefit from BRICS through the potential opportunities arising from increased trade and investments with Brazil, with South Africa, some of the countries that Malaysia previously don't have much of an economic relationship with. Even economic relationship with Russia has not been very much. So I think BRICS will enable Malaysia to tap into opportunities.
All beneficial for Malaysia as it seeks to diversify both its import and export markets while gaining a stronger voice on the international stage. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Kuala Lumpur.
A Russian expert says BRICS has become an important part of a multipolar world. Alexei Maslov is the director of the Institute of Asian and African Studies of Moscow State University.
First of all, I must point out that BRICS has become an important platform for international cooperation. It brings many countries together and sets a series of goals. First, its goal is to keep the world economy stable and conduct economic dialogues. It's committed to promoting economic and trade exchanges and create a comfortable environment for businesses. China has brought up a number of proposals in this regard, and they've been raised well before the summit. Then, BRICS nations are committed to promoting collective security. We see that BRICS nations are becoming an important summit of a multipolar world. It guarantees not just military security, but also cybersecurity and food security, among others.
World Bank Senior Managing Director Axel van Trotsenburg is calling for good investment support for countries in the global south in dealing with bigger challenges like climate change and decarbonization. In an interview with CGTN, he explains the urgency for a joint effort in addressing those issues.
In your speech at the Munich Security Conference earlier this year, you've highlighted the divergent pathways to decarbonization between the global north and the global south. Could you elaborate on the challenges and opportunities in motivating countries in the global south to balance their developmental aspirations with decarbonization? What should be better addressed here?
Well, I mentioned we need to differentiate because there are countries that are creating many more emissions than others. Take, for example, Africa. Africa is disproportionately affected by climate change and carbon emissions, but itself is generating only 3% of global emissions. So there are differences where one is stated. Clearly, when you are a more middle-income country in Latin America or here in China, there is a different picture than, for example, in Africa. And that differentiation you have to take into account. Similar, you need to look at the United States or Europe, where there again are differences, and those differences we need to pact. What is important is that this requires also a different set of policy responses, but I think we should all be very much aware that only jointly we can make progress. And that means we need to make investments, and I highlighted at that time also the challenges of the investment requirements. Today, we are collectively maybe investing in the order of $1.3 trillion in climate resilient investments. That's only maybe 1.2% of global GDP. However, actually we would need maybe 5 times as much. And that is where we then need to look, how can we mobilize the private sector? How can we mobilize also governments to do more? And how can we actually make sure that those countries, particularly the poorest countries, get the necessary support? Their investment needs are the highest, sometimes 8% of their GDP, but they don't have the resources. So that is a call for helping, supporting them in good investments that can actually deal with these big challenges. And a good example, I just came back and there's wonderful weather out here in Beijing. What it shows is that within a couple of years, Beijing, for example, has been able to clean up enormously polluted air. I worked here 10 years ago to see what you can do if you set your mind on it, if you make the necessary investment, and also look at the energy transition by, for example, having a coal phase out here around Beijing, and it can make an enormous effect and have an impact on the population for the good of them. And maybe that are, again, things you can learn of and see how we can do with the necessary investment, really make the transformational changes that are required.
More countries wants to join, and let's also talk about the expansion of the BRICS membership. It really marks the beginning of this greater BRICS, the idea that's been floating around in this year's summit. How do you assess, Professor Chu, the current practices of the BRICS organization?
Well, I think they're doing pretty well, but still I think challenges still waiting ahead of us for sure, because you want every country with multilateralism, with their own individual personalities to come together to fight for one endeavor. And I think that needs effort and leadership. And also I think we need to, right now I think everybody agreed on the same page because the common pressures from the global turbulence, and everybody have a same agenda on the technology and the green development, economic growth, that's for sure. But among all these, I think there are still disputes and arguments and differences, and we need to still try to make sure this differences can be solved. And also, I think among all these member countries, a lot of countries are saying, okay, we're doing more than the other countries. And how can we make sure that every country can be accountable, but also beneficial from the whole system and platform on an equal footing? And that is very, very important, because if you want the sustainability and the future, longer future for this, and I think we're going to have a more well-oiled mechanism for this to run in a longer term. So I think more details, because as I mentioned, with more dots join this whole network, you are going to have exponentially increased problems and differences rather than just 5 dots or 5 countries in here. So with more to come, let's say about another 30 countries to come into this network, just imagine how much of the differences and problems that potentially we're going to have. So right now we need to have the rules, we need to have the basis to solve these potential problems and to make sure these forces can build a synergy rather than to split up all the effort. I think this is what we need to consider today.
Absolutely. Everyone comes in with their own set of priorities, their own set of problems and issues, and it takes a village, a big one, to really get them solved. We're of course watching out for that BRICS Plus dialogue, which can get underway any minute now. We're watching them very closely for our viewers here. But Professor Wang, what do you imagine will be some of the topics at the Plus dialogue between existing BRICS members and what they're calling their outreach friends? What could they possibly be talking about?
Well, on top of the agenda, I think obviously will be on economy and trade and investments. And all these related issues that are on top of the head of every major leaders in the world. And I think they're going to talk about a lot about how to help the Global South out of the existing economic crisis that some of the countries are in. At the same time, how to settle the issues with the existing inequalities in international development, where the developed countries are still very much in control of the global governance institutions. At the same time, when these institutions are not functioning well for their interests, they simply have the choice of dumping those institutions. So that's something I think the developing countries are not quite happy, and how to put together the resources for better economic opportunities will definitely be on the agenda. But relatedly, we've been talking about sustainable development, digital development, and all these issues will also be over there. At the same time, peace and security are top concerns. And
Gentlemen, let's just leave it there and go live to Kazan, where the BRICS Plus dialogue, this group photo is taking place from the venue of this mechanism. Well, the BRICS Plus dialogue mechanism was proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping back in 2017 to include more members to poll the political will and wisdom from countries around the world. And attending here today include not only the heads of state and their representatives of the founding members, but also the newcomers in this organization, 5 countries, and the other representatives of international organizations.
It's a big circle of friends, and in case if you're wondering what topics will get underway, Russia actually has revealed some of the topics for this expanded group of leaders, what they're calling an outreach meeting. Russia will address the fight against terrorism, apparently, cross-border crime and poverty. The country said it will also discuss peaceful settlement of the conflicts. Gentlemen, as we just saw just now, a big circle of friends arriving for the BRICS Plus dialogue today. It looks like the leaders are in a relatively relaxed mood, smiling and patting on the back of each other as they take that group photo to mark the occasion. Let's continue to talk about what are some of the topics that could get underway for them later, because you're obviously not just talking within the groups now, you're talking with aspiring nations. And for a lot of them, they're wanting to join the group based on their own economic conditions. They're hoping to pull wisdom of existing BRICS members. Mr. Chu, can you shed light maybe also on some of the topics that could get underway?
Well, according to my knowledge, several important topics, and economic-wise and also technology-wise, will be surely discussed. For example, like international payment system and trade systems. Within the BRICS countries, like Professor Wang just mentioned, well, I think the first page that everybody can agree on is the trade and the financial cooperations. This is vitally important. I think within the 5 major countries, they have already agreed with the main principles and frameworks, but with the newcomers, how they can share the responsibility, how they can benefit from this system remain to be discussed. Saudi Arabia is very rich for sure, but they want technology. And also some other nations like India, they are yearning for the capitals to develop their own economy and have rubles internationally have a larger position. And also talking about Ethiopia, they probably need a stronger push from the other partner to supporting their whole economy. And also the newcomers, the potential ones like Malaysia, they're very, very strong in semiconductors and international trade. But they're also a raw material exporters. So how we can balance, they are strong foot, and how we can help them to join in this family financially and trade-wise. I think it can be a very important topic. And I think second one is about AI. A lot of people are laughing about China and say, okay, Chinese AI are lagging behind the United States. Well, that's true because, well, thanks to them, sanction our semiconductors and chips, but still we're trying to make it and manage to do some great large language models. But talking about other developing nations, they probably are not so lucky or prestigious, because look at Ethiopia, look at Brazil. They are still trying to get there in the first place, develop their own model of AI. So right now, you're only seeing that China and the United States, and even European Union are fighting forward to get their own AI. So how can we make sure that all these nations, accounting for more than 50% of the world population, can have their own rule of law and leadership in the AI? And I think this is very important because next generation is all about AI. Everybody knows this. So I think developing nations and global South nations should never and will never be lack from the representation in this regard. So how can we catch up together, form the synergy, and champion this endeavor. And I think this will surely be discussed during this conference. And I think there are more to come within the political international orders. But I think Professor Wang is a true expert in this area.
Well, Mr. Chu just helped us break down, the advantages and strengths each member state has to offer from within the BRICS bloc. I want to get your thoughts on this, Professor Wang, in terms of policy coordination as well as resource sharing among the member states.
Mm-hmm. Right, I think in the long run, to get back to your question about institutionalization, running of the BRICS community in the future, I think in the long run, there's got to be a more institutionalized standard operation procedure being designed for the BRICS to go further, especially after more members are joining this organization. You really need an organization, basically. That means you need a bureaucracy that provides the services, that follows rules, and that serves the interests of members. I think the summits are very important in gathering the world leaders, the national leaders, in expressing their common voices and sending messages to the world. But equally important is a day-to-day organizational structure, which I don't think it's going to happen very soon. However, it's needed. Because only by having a stabilized institution can you run as far as possible. At the same time, I think the decision-making process probably also needs some working as well. Right now, obviously, it features consensus building. It features equal voting shares by the 5 founding members. But what about the other 5 members that are newly joining the club? What about the newly, the aspirational members, who are considering joining the club? So decision making, in the long run, is also going to be a challenge. So that takes some deliberation among the 5 founding members. Also takes some wisdom and leadership between them.
Yeah, gentlemen, seeing that group photo just now really makes you think and reflect back on the inclusiveness of BRICS, because with other international elite groups, it's very rare, if ever, we see a group photo encompassing not just existing members, but aspiring nations, a family photo that would include would-be family members, and certainly makes you wonder about the strengths and the vitality that comes in with just how inclusive BRICS is. Mr. Chu, can we have you talk a little bit about the inclusiveness of BRICS and how that adds to the strength and vitality of the organization?
Well, I think this is actually the match point of the BRICS. Actually, the leading countries, the 5 leading countries, the primary ones, actually are showing a very good example that it's equal footing. No country trying to be more superior than the other nations, and nobody is forcing their own values, religions, political values, anything else upon the other people. You see, I think the funding blocks actually set up a very good principle. That is, okay, we understand what we're going to achieve as Global South, and we're not trying to, force my things upon you. And let's talk about the things on an equal footing, on a very peaceful environment, relaxing. Let's chill out. You don't need to choose side. You can preserve your own attitude. You can have your own value. That's for sure. But we still, beyond all that, we have a very, very large of the common ground that we can stand together. The Pacific Ocean is very large enough that it can accommodate all the nations, and the Euro-Asian continent is large enough, can accommodate all the nations, right? So I think these starting 5 blocks, when they agree on that, every other nations can follow suit, and they see examples, they see how it happens, how it runs, and then they join in. You just take a look. They finally get so chill out. While in other occasions, they probably will confront each other with poker face, probably with anger face, because they have more to fight against each other to grab for their own. But here is more a place to put aside the differences and then talk about what we can do together, because they understand by shaking hands in here and smile to each other, they will have more to get rather than to give away. So I think that is a very good successful example to show the world how the globalism and multilateralism can actually happen. A lot of people used to say, okay, we should have a hegemony. When they say yes, when they say go right or go left, and everybody should follow. And that is the way to achieve so. But actually it's not. When everybody can have a true stake and everybody can have a real respect within the system, when the whole system can really reach out and embrace diversity, and you from your guts will feel that and agree that, and once you get into this kind of environment, you will love it and you don't want to live it. And I think that's the reason why it will continue to be here, expanding, get prosperous, and then provide more contribution to the world.
I want to, sure,
Yeah,
go ahead, Professor.
I was thinking, I'd like to add up to Professor Chu's great point that if you look at the existing institutions, especially the ones promoted by the United States, a lot of the promotion is based on ideology. That is Western democracy versus non-democracy, as if this is the only criteria to categorize the countries in the world, which I think is totally unreasonable because the world is so diverse. Just think about the BRICS countries, and all the 5 founding members come from very different value systems, very different cultures and civilizations. So there's no point of having a one singular ideology determining the grouping in the entire world. So BRICS has a great advantage of being not based upon one singular ideology, democracy or whatever, but at the same time is trying to build a common bonding source for all the countries.
I want to share with you some figures here. Now, with the latest expansion of the BRICS organization, the combined GDP of BRICS countries account for about 30% of the global total. Their trade, of course, making up 1/5 of global trade. What impact will all these developments have on the global economy going forward?
Well, global-wise, I think its growth actually represented the future of the whole world. Just take a look at the demographic structure in the major economies right now getting oldened, that's for sure. America, while relying on the immigrants, probably have a younger demographic structure, but European Union, we see their consumption confidence recently happened in the major pillars, for example, Germany and France and Italy are dropping very, very fast. Meanwhile, the situation happening in Japan and South Korea are showing that, the next wave and next momentum needs to be happening with the emerging market. We did a lot of survey in ASEAN nations. ASEAN nations will have 600 million people, and they are rising up middle income classes about 300 million. And same story happening with Latin America. They have similar size of population, growing very, very young and growing consumption groups. And letting alone, I'm not even starting with Africa. Well, with more than 50 countries in there and a very, very emerging and booming market with the support of the BRICS, network. Just to show you just one example, Rwanda. If you went there like 20 years ago, oh my God, that's just like even a disaster. Just after a war, tribal conflicts, many people were dying, and hunger, and also poverty, extreme poverty. And now if you go there, they call Rwanda actually the Singapore of Africa. Free trade, great institutions, management of the government, the cleanest, streets as anywhere you can see in the developed nations, as well as for very good infrastructures. Who are helping them? I think is BRICS country network, supporting the capitals in need, technology you need, talents you need, and everything. So it shows, actually, they're saying, okay, poor people are helping poor people are getting nowhere. This is actually a very vivid example telling you that when you can pull your force together, form the synergy, even the developing nations can form a miracle. And just one small, tiny example, but very important deal for the Rwanda people is the Rwanda's development. More to come. Go to Mauritius. Well, I invite you to go to Mauritius. Mauritius have a booming offshore financial industry / modern agriculture / manufacturing industries. And also go to Chile and go to Indonesia and please go to even in the war, during the war in Myanmar, they still have some provinces get very positive GDP growth supported by the ASEAN nations together / BRICS support. So that shows you When we can work together, there is a future. And that future is not only for the global south, but for the whole world in the future.
Fantastic examples there.
I haven't been to many of those places mentioned by Mr. Chu. We should get our foot on the ground to know more about what really is happening there. Professor Wang, something you said struck a note with me about the differences between BRICS and other elite groups dominated by Western powers. So here's a question. How do you think the Western-dominated groups are looking at BRICS? Is there pushback, resistance from these groups? And could there in the future be engagements or interactions between groups representing the global north and groups like BRICS representing the global south?
Well, I'm sure a lot of them are not extremely happy with the gathering of the BRICS leaders and BRICS Plus leaders. And according to what I've read from Western media, obviously they're looking at this summit as something in response to challenging the existing so-called rules-based order that the BRICS countries is trying to build a new order, which I don't quite agree. I think that the BRICS is not trying to displace the existing order. Rather, it is trying to complement the existing order. It is trying to address issues that are not being addressed by the existing institutions. And I think the Western-dominated institutions really need to reflect upon their own work. And in fact, a lot of the Western scholars do this. They've done a lot of research studying, reflecting upon the development work funded, supported by the development agencies in the past 7 decades, and why is it that the world is still in such a great need of development funding and progress. And that speaks a lot about the existing problems in those institutions. Rather, either they're way too bureaucratic, or on the national agenda, at the end of the day, they don't really care too much about development in the developing countries. Rather, they're more interested in developing their own profits and business interests. So speaking of Africa, I think Professor Chu gave a lot of very fantastic examples of the development progress over there. But Africa is a perfect case to illustrate decades of being overlooked by the West, particularly by the U.S. And there's no doubt the U.S. has given a lot of aid to African countries, but at the end of the day, a lot of aid is not functioning really well. At the same time, a lot of aid actually is used to purchase American agricultural products and other products. So many Africans, and if you look at the Afrobarometer data, which is a regular survey of the African social values and political values, their attitude toward the U.S. is in general good, but a lot of them are really concerned about being overlooked by the world's most powerful nation, which is the United States so far, that the U.S. is not giving them the needed attention. For example, Biden has been talking about visiting Africa. He still doesn't make it. He had an excuse of having to take care of the hurricane crisis in North Carolina and Florida. But still, American government is really overlooking Africa, and Africans are not happy about that. Then in comparison, if you look at China, India, even Brazil is also having a lot of aid projects in the Portuguese-speaking countries like Mozambique and Angola. So the BRICS countries are setting a new example of international development, which is South-South cooperation. I think Professor Chu made a very good point in that previously it seems that people assume that only the global north can do development work, can provide models and funding and other resources for developing countries to go about. But now it's changing, because you can tell Belt and Road Initiative is really functioning well in terms of bringing in investment opportunities and loans and resources to the developing countries. India, Brazil are showcasing to the global south that you can, if I emerge from all the other developing countries, you can emerge as well. So sharing the development experience, sharing the resources is a very important part of the BRICS community.
I want to bring up the issue of energy security and sustainability, which is key to the economic development of BRICS countries. And right now, the group accounts for 40% of global crude oil production and exports. Professor Chu, how does this diversity of resources among the members shape their collaborative efforts in the energy industry?
Well, actually, this is a very good point. A lot of people say, how can they even agree with each other on the same page? Just look, China wants green development, Russia are selling oil, Iran are selling oil, Saudi Arabia are selling oil. How does that even happening, right? But actually, they misunderstood the whole thing. Because, well, even though we have more than 50% of the members are selling oil sellers, gas sellers, but what's really behind their mind is they want the true modernization and development. Well, just a little public secret. A lot of people doesn't know. They all know Saudi Arabia is super rich, but do you know that UAE is super rich as well? UAE and Saudi Arabia are not developed nations. Why is that? Because even themselves understand they do not have the capacity of the manufacturing, of the modernized, the technology-based, industry. That's a problem of bothering the leaders in Saudi Arabia and UAE. And what they truly want is that they want to modernize themselves. They want to upgrade their whole economic structures. That's the reason why they want bond, shake hands with energy. Right now, I can use my raw material like energy to support everybody's development. But in return, I can get more introduction in of the modern technology, the capacities that I need. For example, China and Russia are helping Saudi Arabia to build their modernized cities and manufacturing sectors. EV are happening in Saudi Arabia. Can you even imagine that in a country which water is more expensive than oil, and they want EV because they fail to understand one fact is that in Saudi Arabia, what's cheaper even than oil? The sunshine. They have basically free land, the sands. They cannot use it for any purpose, but they can use it for the solar farm and the wind farms to go to the beach of the Red Sea.
Apologize for the interruption, Mr. Chu. Chinese President Xi Jinping is speaking.
Colleagues, first of all, I would like to say a big thank you to President Putin and the government for organizing the BRICS Plus dialogue. I'm delighted to join you and also express my welcome to all of you attending this dialogue. It is so delighted to meet my new and old friends in the city of Kazan. Right now, we are seeing the rising of the Global South, which is a signature for the transformation of the world. For the countries from Global South has marched towards the modernization, which is a big event in the history and also shows important steps for the human civilization. Meanwhile, the world peace and development still face formidable challenges. The Global South still have a long way to go for its revitalization. As the first frontier bloc of the Global South countries, we have to show collective wisdom and strength to make our contribution and show the responsibilities to build a community of shared future for mankind. We have to uphold the peace and achieve common security. We have to be the stabilizer to ensure the security and also to continue our efforts to solve problems to ensure the global security. I propose the Global Security Initiative, which has been well received from multiple parties. This has been achieved a lot of progress in various districts in maintaining peace and stability. China, Brazil had released 6 consensus. We also work together with the Global South countries and also establish a task force to resolve the Ukraine crisis. We have to make sure to de-escalate the tension in the current situation and use political settlement. In July this year, parties from the Palestinian had made reconciliation in Beijing, which have made a big step for resolve the Middle East tension. We will continue to advance the ceasefire efforts in Gaza district and to initiate new initiative to make sure that the war will not extend it to Lebanon. We want to continue our efforts to maintain peace in Palestine and also Lebanon. We have to make sure we want to achieve a universal prosperity. The Global South is born out of development and will thrive through development. We will become the pillar force for the development and take proactive actions to participate in the reform of the global governance. We have to bring development back to the center of the global agenda. According to the Global Development Initiative, with the past 3 years, we have used funds up to $20 billion, and also we have implemented over 1,100 projects for the manufacturing sector, AI sector. Recently, we will continue to implement more projects in China. China will also establish to set up a platform for smart customs and also set up a pilot zone to facilitate the customs with BRICS countries. We also welcome all of you to participate in this endeavor. We will continue to build a multi-civilization. Various civilization is the defining color of the world. We will continue to promote the development of the civilization. We will continue to strengthen our exchanges and support each other to follow on the path to modernization that suits their own situation. I propose the initiative for global civilization, which aims to build the world with diverse civilization. China will take the lead to establish the Global South Think Tank Alliance to promote the people-to-people exchanges and mutual appreciation.
Dear colleagues, the Communist Party of China's third plenary session of the 20th Congress will continue to make deployment of modernization with China's characteristics and will be providing more opportunities for the world. Last month, the Beijing Summit of China-Africa Cooperation was successfully held, in which a joint declaration and 10 partnerships of promoting China-Africa modernization have been proposed, and which will give new momentum for the development of the Global South. However, the global situation changes. China will always commit itself to the development of the Global South and find its roots in the Global South and support more countries in the Global South to join the BRICS in multiple partnerships and jointly promote the building of a community of a shared future for mankind. I want to once again thank President Putin for your work that you put into the organization of the BRICS Summit this time. It would not be possible for us to join together without your effort. Thank you very much.
As we saw right there, Chinese President Xi Jinping addressing delegates at the BRICS Plus dialogue meeting taking place in Kazan, Russia. There he mentioned, the consensus that's coming out from the previous discussions with leaders of the BRICS countries as well as the aspirational countries. There needs to be proactive actions being taken from member states. And then he also called on efforts to bring development back on the global agenda. He specifically mentioned another multilateral platform, which is the FOCAC, the Forum of China and Africa Cooperation. So lots of issues on the agenda, and he really laid out his vision for the bloc going forward.
Absolutely. The president also pointed out that there is a long way to go for the global south, and they should use collective wisdom and strength to push forward progress. He specifically said that China is committed to the development of the global south and that everyone should join hands in building a community with a shared future for mankind. Let's talk about all of this with our studio guests here. Gentlemen, what exactly stood out to you? Let's start with Professor Chu here.
Well, I think President Xi Jinping mentioned very clearly about what's China's role and what China can do for this platform and for the other, bigger group of the South country. And I think what we can do here is that to support the development, because I think in the first place, China is a very grateful country. We still remember what happened when China just established, starting from everything from scratch, how we can develop ourselves into the second largest economy of the whole world. We do think this is a global endeavor supported by many global South countries to help China to get where we are right now. And I think China really want to contribute back to the global trade by the global economy, supporting the modernization and industrialization of the global South nations. We're doing this not only because China is a grateful country, we want to make peace with all the other neighbors, all the partners.
Professor Chu, hold that thought. I'll be back with you in just a moment. But for now, we do want to check in with CGTN correspondent Alyosa Milenkovic in Kazan. Alyosa, we just heard from the Chinese president attending the BRICS Plus dialogue today. What more can you tell us about the reactions to the president's speech?
Hello, Beijing. Yes, the reactions here are, we would say, quite positive, particularly on the area about resolving of Ukraine crisis, because President Xi Jinping mentioned that 6 BRICS member countries agreed about the declaration and that they are calling for peaceful resolution of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And this is something that the entire world is quite happy to hear about, particularly after so many days and weeks and months and 2.5 years, over 2.5 years of conflict in Ukraine, which took hundreds of thousands of lives, according to various reports. So China and 6 other BRICS member countries are actually calling for peaceful resolution, calling for all parties to sit at the table and try to resolve all those issues and all those problems, because apparently all those countries are aware about the possibility of escalation of this conflict. And this is something that BRICS countries, China of course leading those countries, that they understand that this conflict can spill over. And this is one of 3 principles that BRICS is apparently insisting upon, that any conflict should be prevented in spilling over, should be controlled and eventually resolved in a peaceful manner. And this is something that was, at least here in the press center, being considered and seen as a highlight and the most important part of President Xi Jinping's speech. Of course, President Xi Jinping also mentioned collaboration between the countries of Global South, and the world should take into account desires and, of course, goals of Global South. And, of course, world we have seen so far being very and deeply divided, hence the name even the Global South. But what we are seeing now is emergence of the economies of the Global South and of course political influence. And that's why President Xi Jinping says that we need, the entire world needs to take into account Global South as well, and to create a multipolar world which will work for benefits of all.
Alyosha, we appreciate that update from you. Thank you so much for that reporting. Gentlemen, as we see, these geopolitical tensions are still outstanding issues that have garnered their fair share of tension at the BRICS Summit. And I guess delegates and participants were pleased to hear, as our reporter mentioned just now, that the Chinese president has once again upheld for peace. If you look at his remarks yesterday, in that speech just now, he began with a message for peace, saying that China and other Global South members should always uphold peace and be a stabilizer in global security. Professor Wang, can we hear your thoughts on what the president said just now?
Right. I think the fact that President Xi, placed the security issue and peace issue on the beginning of his speech speaks about the importance and also the priority on his mind and on the Chinese government's mind regarding the BRICS future development, especially for this summit. I think the peace issue in the crisis in Ukraine, but more than anything else, the Gaza crisis are really exerting a great loss and casualty in both in Europe and in the Middle East. And from the Chinese point of view, I think China rolled out the Global Security Initiative a number of years ago, and which emphasizes the importance of resolving conflicts through deliberation and dialogues. And in fact, China and Brazil brought up a proposal to the UNGA in September this year with regard to a peace settlement proposal in Ukraine. And so all of that is saying that China is very much paying attention to the security issues around the world. At the same time, I think China is also trying to tell the rest of the world, for example, to Europe, that China is concerned about the security issue on the European continent, and China is willing to add up its contribution. But other than that, let me also highlight a few points that President Xi brought up in his speech that he just gave, and think he was trying to highlight what China can do to the BRICS. And previously we talked about the future how the long-term plan for the BRICS, and I think one issue is regarding leadership. So China, I think, is ready to undertake more of that share of the leadership in providing the initiatives and the resources, the technologies, and also the funding. For example, President Xi brought up the Global Development Initiative that was also rolled out by the Chinese authority a couple of years ago, which is about China's wisdom and solution to the international development issues that we have talked about earlier. And China has been doing a lot in addressing the development gap and needs in the Global South. So China can continue to do it. At the same time, the BRICS can also be further combined with the Chinese efforts on global development, on global security initiative, and also on the global civilization initiative. We talk about the diversity of civilizations and cultures of the founding members, but also the newly added members in the BRICS. So civilization and cultural exchange and people-to-people exchange are highly regarded by President Xi Jinping and by the Chinese authority. And also that's injected into the mission of the BRICS.
All right, gentlemen, we appreciate your insight and expertise as always. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thank you. And with that, we wrap things up with Kazan. And of course, CGTN will certainly have in-depth analysis of the proceedings there from the Russian city, and we'll keep you updated on that.
The BRICS Plus dialogue is still continuing. We'll be sure to keep you posted on any details that emerge from the meetings there. Be sure to stay with us right here on CGTN. For now, on behalf of the entire team in Beijing, thank you so much for your
Thanks
company.
for being with us.